Somewhere beneath a hill in central China, there is a tomb the size of a small city, sealed for over 2,000 years, and to this day, no living person has ever opened its central chamber. Not because no one has tried, not because the technology doesn't exist, but because the moment archaeologists broke the seal on a nearby pit in 1974, the painted colors on 7,000 life-size clay soldiers began to flake away and vanish within minutes right in front of their eyes. That single, irreversible loss is the reason the emperor's actual burial chamber, rumored to contain rivers of flowing mercury and a ceiling studded with pearls representing the stars, remains untouched. What else is hidden inside tombs so dangerous, so sacred, or so politically explosive that the world's best archaeologists have agreed, on purpose, to leave them sealed? Stay with us, because some of these stories are stranger than any fiction you've ever read. Let's start with that tomb in China, because it sets the tone for everything else we're about to explore. The man buried there is Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China, a ruler so obsessed with controlling the world even after death that he began planning his own tomb the moment he took the throne as a 13-year-old boy. Historical records written a century after his death describe an underground palace built beneath a massive earthen mound near the city of Xi'an. According to those ancient accounts, the tomb contains replica palaces, towers, and government offices. It is said to have rivers and seas made of flowing liquid mercury, mechanically pumped to simulate the real geography of his empire. The ceiling is described as a map of the heavens, inlaid with pearls standing in for stars and constellations. And to protect it all, the builders allegedly installed crossbows rigged to fire automatically at anyone who dared to walk in uninvited. For decades, many historians assumed these details were exaggerated legend, the kind of myth that grows around powerful men after they die. Then, in 1974, a group of farmers digging a well stumbled onto something that changed everything. An underground pit filled with life-size terracotta soldiers, each one with a unique face, unique armor, and unique posture, standing in military formation as if ready to march. Since that discovery, more than 8,000 statues have been found in the surrounding pits. Soldiers, horses, chariots, acrobats, musicians, and officials, an entire spirit army meant to serve and protect the emperor in the afterlife. And here's where the story becomes almost eerie in its precision. Modern soil tests conducted around the central burial mound have detected levels of mercury dramatically higher than the natural background level in some readings, up to 100 times higher. That's not proof of an actual underground river of liquid metal, but it lines up disturbingly well with a 2,000-year-old written description that, until recently, nobody could verify. If the ancient chronicles were right about the mercury, what else were they right about? The traps? The palaces? Nobody knows, because nobody has gone in to check. The Chinese government has made a clear and public decision. The central tomb of Qin Shi Huang will not be excavated with current technology. And the reasoning is worth sitting with for a moment, because it's not superstition, it's hard-earned caution. When archaeologists opened that very first pit of terracotta soldiers in the 1970s, they discovered something remarkable. Many of the statues had originally been painted in vivid colors: reds, greens, blues, and purples. But the instant those figures were exposed to open air after 2,000 years sealed underground, the paint began curling and flaking away, turning to dust in a matter of minutes. Photographs from that excavation show archaeologists watching helplessly as centuries of color simply disappeared before proper preservation techniques could be applied. It was a devastating, irreversible lesson, and it's the single biggest reason the main tomb remains closed. If simple painted clay could be destroyed that fast, what would happen to silk, wood, bronze, or organic materials sealed inside the emperor's actual burial chamber the moment air rushed in? Chinese archaeologists have essentially made a pact with the future. Wait until preservation science is good enough to guarantee nothing is lost, even if that means an entire generation of researchers dies without ever seeing what's inside. That is an extraordinary act of scientific patience, and it's one of the reasons this tomb remains, quite literally, one of the most tantalizing unopened mysteries on Earth. Now, let's travel from China to Egypt, to a tomb that might be the most famous archaeological discovery of the 20th century, and one that still has a locked door nobody has fully opened. In November of 1922, the British archaeologist Howard Carter, funded by Lord Carnarvon, uncovered a staircase in the Valley of the Kings that led to a sealed doorway. Behind it was the nearly intact tomb of Tutankhamun, the boy pharaoh who died around the age of 19. It remains, to this day, the most complete royal Egyptian tomb ever found, over 5,000 objects, including the now iconic solid gold death mask, chariots, weapons, furniture, and the mummy itself, still wrapped in linen and gold. The discovery made global headlines, and within months, rumors of a curse began to spread after several people connected to the excavation died under circumstances that were, frankly, mostly explainable but made for irresistible newspaper copy. Lord Carnarvon himself died a few months after the opening from an infected mosquito bite that led to blood poisoning. The press ran with it. The Curse of the Pharaohs became a worldwide sensation, and it is stuck in popular culture for over a century. But here's the part most people don't know, and it's far more interesting than any curse. For years, a British Egyptologist named Nicholas Reeves has argued that Tutankhamun's tomb may not be complete at all. Using high-resolution laser scans of the tomb's walls, Reeves identified what appear to be straight, man-made lines behind the painted plaster lines consistent with sealed, hidden doorways. His theory is bold. He believes those doorways may lead to additional chambers, and that one of them could be the final resting place of Queen Nefertiti, one of the most powerful and visually iconic women in ancient Egyptian history, whose actual tomb has never been found. Multiple rounds of radar scanning were conducted between 2015 and 2018 by different international teams, and the results have been maddeningly inconsistent. Some scans appeared to show voids and anomalies behind the walls, while later, more advanced radar surveys found no clear evidence of hidden chambers at all. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities has been cautious, understandably so, because breaking into painted walls inside one of the best preserved tombs in human history is not something you do on a hunch. Every test, every scan, every centimeter of investigation has to be non-invasive. Because if Reeves is wrong, you've just damaged irreplaceable 3,000-year-old artwork for nothing. If he's right, somewhere behind that wall could be an entirely undisturbed queen's burial, untouched by looters, filled with treasures that would make the original 1,922 discovery look modest by comparison. As of now, no physical opening has been made. The wall stands exactly as Howard Carter left it, and so the tomb that changed archaeology forever might still be hiding its greatest secret. Let's move to South America now, to a discovery that, in scientific terms, is arguably just as important as Tutankhamun's tomb, even though far fewer people around the world have heard of it. In 1987, in a small town in northern Peru called Sipán, archaeologist Walter Alva raced against time to save a royal tomb from looters who had already begun tunneling into it. What he found, once his team took over the site, was staggering. The intact burial of a Moche lord, now known as the Lord of Sipán, who ruled roughly 1,700 years ago, centuries before the rise of the Inca Empire. The lord was buried in elaborate gold and silver regalia, a towering headdress, a gold and turquoise pectoral, ceremonial scepters, and nose ornaments crafted with extraordinary skill. Buried alongside him were sacrifice companions, a warrior missing his left foot, thought to ensure he could never run away in the afterlife, a young woman, a dog, and even a child, laid out in a funerary arrangement rich with symbolic meaning archaeologists are still decoding. What makes Sipán relevant to our theme tonight is what happened after the discovery. Looters, locally called huaqueros, had already been raiding the surrounding pyramid complex for years before archaeologists arrived, and they returned almost immediately once official work paused. To this day, large portions of the Sipán complex and dozens of other Moche and pre-Inca sites scattered across Peru's northern coast remain formally off-limits to full excavation, not because of ancient curses or hidden traps, but because of a very modern, very human threat: the black market for looted antiquities. Fully excavating a tomb means publicly revealing exactly where the treasure is, and in regions where security resources are limited, that can be a fatal invitation. Peruvian archaeologists have had to make an agonizing calculation again and again. Sometimes it is safer and more responsible to leave an unexcavated tomb buried and hidden than to expose it and risk losing it forever to organized looting networks. It's a sobering reminder that the greatest threat to these ancient treasures isn't always time, or the elements, or forgotten curses. Sometimes it's us. Before we leave Egypt entirely, there's one more secret worth mentioning. Because it isn't buried underground at all, it's sitting in plain sight, inside a structure millions of tourists photograph every single year. The Great Pyramid of Giza, built for the pharaoh Khufu roughly 4,500 years ago, has 3 known chambers connected by narrow passages. But in 2017, an international team of physicists, using a technique called muon tomography, Essentially reading the shadows cast by cosmic particles as they pass through solid stone detected a massive void above the pyramid's grand gallery, roughly the size of a passenger airplane, with no known entrance and no known purpose. It was one of the biggest archaeological headlines of the decade. And yet, years later, that void remains completely unexplored. No drill, no camera, no human hand has entered it. Why? Because the Great Pyramid is one of the most structurally sensitive ancient buildings on the planet, made of over 2 million limestone blocks, balanced in a way engineers still don't fully understand, Egyptian authorities have been extremely reluctant to allow any kind of invasive drilling, worried that even a small, carefully placed hole could destabilize internal stress points that have held for over 4,000 years. So instead, teams have relied entirely on passive scanning technology, patiently mapping a space they cannot yet physically enter. It's a strange, almost futuristic kind of archaeology, discovering something enormous and mysterious, and then being forced to simply stare at it from a distance, unable to reach out and touch it for years on end. Now, before we go further into the darker and stranger corners of this list, this is a good moment to pause. If stories like these hidden tombs, sealed chambers, secrets buried for thousands of years are the kind of thing that keeps you curious late into the night, go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now so you never miss the next mystery we uncover together. And I genuinely love to know something from you. Out of everything we've covered so far tonight, which sealed tomb would you want opened first? If you could make that decision yourself, right now, knowing you might witness whatever is inside before anyone else in history, drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and I'm always fascinated by which mysteries pull at people the most. Let's continue, because we haven't even reached some of the strangest cases yet. Travel now to modern-day Iran, to the ancient city of Pasargadae, where a simple 6-tiered limestone structure rises out of the plain, topped by a small stone chamber. This is the tomb of Cyrus the Great, founder of the Persian Empire, one of the most influential rulers in the ancient world, a man credited by later Jewish tradition with allowing exiled peoples to return to their homelands and rebuild their temples. Unlike the tombs we've discussed so far, Cyrus's resting place isn't hidden behind sealed doors or radar anomalies. It has been open and visible for over 2,000 years. Alexander the Great himself is said to have visited the tomb after conquering the Persian Empire and was reportedly horrified to find it had already been looted and desecrated, its original golden coffin and rich furnishings long gone by the time he arrived. He ordered it restored out of respect for Cyrus, a rival ruler he clearly still admired. So why does this tomb belong on a list about forbidden or restricted archaeology? Because in modern times, the restriction isn't about the physical structure, it's about everything around it. The land surrounding Pasargadae sits near the site of a controversial dam project that, for years, threatened to raise water tables and potentially damage the ancient foundations. The proposal sparked such intense public backlash inside Iran, from citizens who see Cyrus as a foundational symbol of national identity, that the government was forced to alter its plans. Archaeological access to certain surrounding areas has been tightly restricted ever since. Partly for preservation, and partly because Cyrus's tomb has become something larger than an archaeological site, it's a political and cultural flashpoint, a place where ancient history and modern national identity collide. Access is permitted, but full invasive archaeological investigation of the surrounding landscape remains, for now, effectively frozen. It's proof that sometimes the reason a tomb stays untouched has nothing to do with mercury rivers or crossbow traps, and everything to do with the living people who still consider that ground sacred. From a tomb that has stood in plain sight for 2,000 years, let's now turn to one of history's most deliberate disappearing acts. A tomb that archaeologists haven't just chosen not to touch, but one they've never even been able to find. When Genghis Khan died in the year 1227, having built the largest contiguous land empire in human history, his followers reportedly carried out one of the most extreme funerary security operations ever recorded. According to several historical accounts, his body was transported back to Mongolia in complete secrecy, and every single person the funeral procession encountered along the way was executed so that no one alive could reveal the route. Once he was buried, location unknown even to us today, the soldiers who dug the grave were themselves killed by another group of soldiers, who were then killed by yet another group, creating a chain of silence with no living witness left at the end. Some accounts claim horses were driven over the burial site repeatedly to erase any trace of disturbed earth, and that a forest was later allowed to grow over the entire area, swallowing any physical marker completely. Nearly 800 years later, despite satellite imagery surveys, ground-penetrating radar expeditions, and numerous international research teams combing the Mongolian steppe, the tomb of Genghis Khan has never been found. And this is genuinely unique among everything we've discussed tonight, because it isn't a case of forbidden in the sense of a locked door or a government restriction. It's forbidden by design, by an empire that valued secrecy over spectacle, that decided the greatest conqueror in their history deserved to vanish completely rather than become a monument for future strangers to pick apart. There is also a cultural dimension that continues today. Many Mongolians view the search for the tomb itself as a form of disrespect, an intrusion into sacred ancestral ground that should remain undisturbed regardless of what treasures or historical answers might lie beneath it. A mountain range in northeastern Mongolia, known as the Ik Korig, or Great Taboo, has been treated as forbidden territory for centuries, long before modern archaeology existed, and many local communities still regard it that way. Some international expeditions, including well-funded ones equipped with satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar, have been quietly discouraged or denied permits for exactly this reason, and a handful of research teams have voluntarily halted their own surveys after local reactions made clear just how deeply that boundary is respected. It raises a question worth sitting with. Is a mystery like this even meant to be solved, or does its power come specifically from the fact that it never will be? Let's bring this back, one more time, to Egypt, because there's a broader pattern happening across the entire Valley of the Kings that ties everything we've discussed together. Modern ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging surveys have revealed dozens of anomalies across the valley: cavities, voids, and structures beneath the sand that have never been excavated. Some Egyptologists believe there could be additional undiscovered tombs in this valley alone, still sealed, still waiting. But excavation in Egypt today moves at a dramatically slower and more careful pace than it did in Howard Carter's era a century ago, and that's intentional. Modern archaeology has learned, sometimes painfully, from its own history, from paint flaking off Chinese terracotta soldiers, from Egyptian tombs stripped by 19th century treasure hunters with no documentation at all, from priceless organic materials that turn to dust within minutes of exposure, to open air after thousands of years sealed in darkness. Every single one of the tombs we've discussed tonight represents a version of the same underlying tension: the overwhelming human desire to know everything immediately, weighed against the sobering reality that some knowledge can only be uncovered once, and if you do it wrong, it's gone forever. For everyone, for all of history. Before we close, there's one more tomb worth mentioning, because it shows this same tension playing out on the opposite side of the planet, in the jungles of southern Mexico. In 1952, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruiz Luhier was excavating the Temple of the Inscriptions at the Maya city of Palenque when he noticed something unusual: a stone slab in the floor, drilled with small holes and fitted with stone plugs, as if someone had wanted it to be liftable rather than permanent. Underneath it, he found a rubble-filled staircase descending deep into the pyramid itself. It took his team 4 full excavation seasons, working on and off, to clear that staircase completely, because the passage had been deliberately packed with stone debris, likely to discourage exactly the kind of intrusion Ruiz Luhier was attempting. At the bottom, he found a triangular stone door, and behind it, a crypt containing the skeleton of a man covered almost entirely in a mosaic mask and ornaments made of jade, resting inside a massive carved sarcophagus lid depicting his descent into the underworld. This was Pakal the Great, one of Palenque's most powerful rulers, and his tomb remains the finest royal burial ever found in the Maya world. What's remarkable is what happened next. Rather than immediately opening the sarcophagus itself, Ruiz Luhier and his successors moved with extraordinary caution, aware that Maya sites had suffered for centuries at the hands of looters and careless early explorers who destroyed context in their rush for treasure. Even decades later, researchers continued to debate details of the tomb's construction, its symbolism, and whether the passageway's design was meant to allow Pakal's spirit to travel between the underworld and the temple above. Large sections of Palenque itself, still buried under jungle canopy to this day, remain deliberately unexcavated. Mexican archaeological authorities have made the same calculated choice we've seen again and again tonight. Better to leave portions of a fragile ancient city sleeping beneath the roots and soil than to expose them faster than they can be properly protected, documented, and preserved. Every additional structure uncovered is one more surface exposed to humidity, looters, and the erosion of time, so the pace stays slow, deliberate, and, to an impatient modern audience, almost frustratingly careful. That's really the thread connecting Qin Shi Huang's Mercury rivers Tutankhamun's hidden doorway, Sipán's looted gold, Cyrus's politically sacred hillside, Genghis Khan's empire-wide conspiracy of silence, and Pakal's jungle-shrouded crypt, still only partly understood after 70 years of study. These aren't just stories about locked doors and buried treasure. They're stories about restraint, about archaeologists, and in some cases, entire governments and cultures, choosing patience over conquest, choosing preservation over glory, even when every instinct, every ounce of curiosity, is screaming at them to just open the door and see what's inside. And maybe that's the real lesson hiding underneath all of this. We live in a world that rewards immediacy, answers now, content now, discovery now. But these tombs, sealed for centuries, sometimes for millennia, are quiet reminders that not every mystery is ours to solve on our own timeline. Somewhere under that Chinese hillside, an emperor is still waiting inside his underground empire. Somewhere behind a painted Egyptian wall, a queen may still be resting exactly where she was placed 3,000 years ago. And somewhere on the open Mongolian steppe, the greatest conqueror in history has achieved, in death, the one thing he could never fully achieve in life, to become completely untouchable. Perhaps that's the true power of a forbidden tomb, not what's locked inside it, but what it teaches the rest of us about patience, respect, and the humility to admit that some doors are better left closed, at least for now. If this journey into the world's most guarded burial sites fascinated you as much as it fascinated me putting it together, make sure you're subscribed, because we uncover a new hidden mystery like this one every single week. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.